All right, class in session. Continuing on with Atomic Attraction book. We're on to chapter 44, coming up to the end here. Like I said, should be done maybe Sunday or Monday, and then I'll start Evolution of Desire. So, anyway, chapter 44 is Attraction Grows in Space. Attraction grows in space. Eroticism resides in the ambiguous space between anxiety and fascination. Esther Perel. Eroticism resides in the ambiguous space between anxiety and fascination. Esther Perel. If there is one aspect of of another that must not be ignored, is space or attraction. Sorry, if there is one aspect of attraction that must not be ignored, is space. Yes. And I mentioned this yesterday in one of my videos, which I didn't even know this was a chapter in Atomic Attraction. And and I, like I said, how do you know someone knows what they're talking about? Well, you start seeing what they're saying and other things, and that information that they're giving is corroborated. So yesterday, I was talking about Nicole Kessinger in the interview, and I said that. So she was saying that Chris Watts was able to talk to her just about whenever, you know. It didn't seem like he was married, you know. She'd call him whenever, and, you know, sometimes there was issues, but most of the time he had free reign to call her. I mean, it wasn't like he was tied down by his wife being over his shoulder. And I said, well, oftentimes that's because he has too much space. And I talked about an experience I had where, you know, I was unfortunately not acting right, and I wouldn't do it again, but I was dating a married woman, and I was able to do a lot of things with her because the husband was never around. He gave her a lot of space. And I said, when you give too much space, you know, there's neglect. And oftentimes a woman will have an affair. Not that it's right, but she'll have an affair if you give her, if you neglect her with too much space. But if you don't give enough space, then she'll leave you because you're smothering her. So anyway, that I had mentioned that yesterday, and so here we are talking about space. I didn't even know this was a chapter. And it talks about if there is one aspect of attraction that must not be ignored, is space. Space is, yeah. So, space is, space or lack thereof space is responsible for more breakups than just about any relationship problem. Space is so powerful and important. It is the means by which attraction either thrives or dies. Correct. Men and women are born into, and this kind of, you know, this explanation that it gives here, the world as a single entity. The moment we exit the womb, we start to develop a sense of self, our own individual identity. Welcome to separate. Welcome to separate ourselves from our parents. Our we come to see ourselves. Hold on, switch pages. Sometimes they get stuck together. Hang on one second. All right. Sometimes they get stuck together. Okay. Sometimes we see ourselves as unique individuals, beings, and the world around the separation of self drives our need for space. Yes, because we need to keep our individual self. If we're always with somebody else, then we're going to be, you know, and you hear these power couples, we're a power couple, we're going to be, you know, all together all the time, we're best friends, and yeah, and then you're going to enmesh with this person. As a man, you shouldn't want that. You should want freedom, and you should, you know, you want your individuality, right? Okay. It drives our need for space. Yes, our individuality, our self-identity drives our need for individual space, for space. We need space to grow and develop and think. We need space to have a sense of our own. Okay, sticking together again. Individual identity. Most relationships start with a bang. The man and woman come together with passion and frequent love bombing. The other desire our the only the other person only to discover later that the uh, that all the life out of all the okay to smother all the life out of the relationship. Yes, because we're together all the time. We're such passionate together all the time, and yeah, we smother the life of the relationship out. This is the great paradox, correct, of space. We want to be free and separate from others, yet we also desire closeness. We do, but you got to have a balance and connection at the same time. Correct. Um, Introducing space is not only important, and always remember, especially as guys. I mean, you know, you cannot you smother a woman, she'll run, dude, run. All right. You never ever want to have a woman. You never want a woman to tell you, "I need space." You want to give it to her so she doesn't have to say that. At the early stage of a relationship, uh, where coming on too strong can damage attraction, space must also exist in a long-term relationship. Exactly, it was 100%, and that's why living together is not a good idea. I never think it's a good idea, especially if you ain't married yet. Do not live together; it'll kill attraction. When a woman loses attraction for a man because the man failed to bring enough space and distance into the relationship, in the same way, when a woman loses interest in sex, it is usually because she feels deprived of space. Attraction has begun to fade. Attraction does not grow in captivity, it grows in space. When space is introduced, the focus is off the self and into the other. When we feel suffocated in relationships, this is because the focus is on the other as opposed to the self. Only when we are granted space, we focus back on wanting individuality or wanting intimacy. Sorry, we focus back on wanting intimacy. This is what all relationships must strive to balance. Balance that is hard to accomplish if one person wants more space than the other. For the vast majority of people, introducing space should not be a problem. Approximately 59% of people have a secure attachment style. You must always allow space into your relationships, even if it feels like space is the last thing the relationship needs. Especially sometimes, you feel insecure, and that's a lot of times when it needs space. The amount of attraction we feel for another person is often in direct proportion to the amount, hold on a second, to the amount of anxiety and uncertainty. The moment women feels smothered in a relationship, the moment she begins to feel a slew of emotions such as apathy, boredom, suffocation, and restlessness. The moment she, the moment of, the moment the idea of space comes, is the moment where a woman is not assured that a man. Oh, okay. Hold on 1 second. About a man's presence. That's true. And then when she's not assured about a man's presence, then the focus is back on the man, right? Men are often plagued by the thought that a woman will forget them. Worse, find someone else, move on to someone else. Once space is introduced, just as your ability to add anxiety into your relationship is often commensurate with the amount of attraction. So if you can add anxiety, you add attraction. If you can add space, you can also add attraction. A woman has for you your ability to introduce space is a direct mental reflection of your strength and character. There is nothing more terrible or nothing more terrifying for a woman than a prospect of losing her freedom in the confines of a suffocating relationship. Yes, women have been stalked and by losers, and so they're very afraid of that. Of all the values we hold dear, freedom is most important. Yeah, people love their liberties and freedoms, absolutely. Yes, we must eat and breathe to survive, but without freedom, we lose our humanity and will to live. This is true of all animals, not just humans. Only an insecure man would deny a woman space to bring her to bind her to him, to allow space into a relationship. You must have the ability to allow a woman to pull away from you and come back to you in her own time. Absolutely. Let her come back to you. That's it. Almost let everything try to come to you, right? Never do the what you doing, the WID, and if you want to get laid, they need to come to you. And if they ain't coming to you, you need to find someone else that will. You start reaching out to women like trying to get laid. They and you haven't talked to them in a while or what? Dude, that ain't gonna work. Many couples try to spend as much time as possible. Yeah, especially the power couples and the people on Facebook with Mark and Cherry Smith of Oakville in the face others in each other's presence, especially as passion runs hot. You must appreciate the speed with which a woman falls in love. A study published in the Journal of Social Psychology revealed that men fall in love a lot faster. We learned that in another chapter too, right? And want intimacy a lot sooner. Two men and women, too many men and women ruin the idea of space in a relationship by making themselves too available, and they talk about everything and they see too much of each other and spend too much time together. Yes. And that's something I've talked about with other people in like the dating space. I'm like, dude, men and women were not supposed to be together this much. What other animals do you see men and women hanging out, laying on a couch? You know what I mean? No, it's usually about banging and leaving. So we've created this like, let's lay on the couch and pillow talk and give each other massages and whatever. No, too much time together. And a woman, dude, they don't admit this when you're first talking to them, like in a relationship, if they're trying to start one. Like, I like talking to him. I like a lot of time with my man. Nah, no, they don't. They'll get tired of it, trust me. If ever I spend too much time with a woman, it always bites me in the butt. Even though they say they want it, right? This lack of space often leads to a severe drop in attraction. Yes, to overcome this problem, you must actively implement the element of space, even if the thought of bringing space to a relationship makes you feel uncomfortable. We've and that actual, even if space makes you feel uncomfortable, I mean, it's almost like they repeated it several times in this chapter. Case study 31. Suffocating attraction. Oh, yeah. This is like a married lady. We'll call her, what's her name? I don't know. Emily. Yeah, Emily. And who was the guy? We'll call him George. Emily and George. But basically, she's been married for 20 years, and she comes to her husband. She says she wants a divorce. And, and it was basically her husband wasn't getting her enough space, and she got bored. She wanted freedom. And I mean, that's just what it's about, So and even in long-term relationships, she felt smothered, So, but that case study was about that. All right. The moment you become predictable is the moment you become boring. Absolutely. What is it? What is it? Yeah, I guess comfort is boring or something like that. Predictable is boring. I think it's the word predictable is boring. Yeah, absolutely. It's the moment you become boring, and that's one of the worst words a woman can say. Tiresome and unattractive. Excuse me. An attractive man does not make his romantic partner his main concern. We saw that just recently in the Chris Watts thing. She's like, yeah, he was too clingy. He liked me too much. That wasn't gonna last. When you live a full and active life, the element of space, yes, like it was just saying here, is when you live a full and active life. Yeah, when you're living how you're supposed to, you don't need to add space. It's just there, because you're busy, and that's what you want. You don't want gimmicks. Don't answer the phone for 2 days, or don't answer a text after 10 minutes. Not just be busy and, get the text whenever you want, will naturally be present in your relationships. When a man and a woman live together, it is still possible to have space by having different friends, hobbies, and seeing family separately. Take the time to work on yourself. Yes. Always be, work out in the gym, having your own hobby. Like I do soccer, I work out a lot, and I do it by myself, So if I'm ever in a relationship, I'm doing those things by myself. Research shows that sleeping in separate beds when in long-term relationships brings the element of space and attraction to the relationships. Many of the best long-lasting relationships comes as a direct result of space being. Okay, these pages keep sticking together. Apologies, but we're almost done. Almost done. Let's get it apart here, baby. Here we go. All right. Introduced by sleeping in separate beds and real quick, I don't know about that. I know there's a study they're saying that. I always found, well, maybe it's because you're sleeping in separate beds because you don't like each other, but if you're doing it when you like each other, it'll help. Because, every time, like, I've ever done that, it's usually when the relationship is falling apart. You're like, I don't want to be around this, I don't know. Well, but, anyway, the research says sleep in separate bed. I agree. I don't like being all up on somebody, Yeah, I definitely don't like, let's just spoon the whole night. No. All right, in separate beds. For the insecure and possessive man, the thought of giving a woman space is enough to send a man into a downward spiral of frustration and anxiety. Yeah, well, that's the loser. Women don't think you're a loser. I mean, come on. No badass will be like, oh, where's my girl? I'm so sad. You got to think of it in those exaggerated terms, right? All right, once again, sticking together. Sorry, guys, we're almost done. About 2 more pages. All right, get off of there. A relationship should never feel like an obligation. There is nothing more unattractive than a person thrusting themselves on another person after they have asked for space. No joke, man. Give me space, and then you're all, dude. I've seen that. Like someone will ask for space. And like the dude starts trying, they get very insecure because at that time it is scary, and you're like, oh, I don't want this person to leave me. So you're kind of like, God, But if the strong person, they'll give them space, And I've done that before, and you feel like the relationship's ending, and you give them space, and it does end. Sometimes it does. I mean, but at least if attraction is going too fast, the element of space must exist. Oh wait, if the attraction is going to exist. If attraction is going to exist, the element of space must exist. Yes, that's what we've been talking about. If attraction is going to exist, the element of space must exist, regardless of whether it feels comfortable or not. Exactly. You got to lean into discomfort sometimes, but you shouldn't have to. I mean, if you're living an abundant life, then you're going to want to be alone, you should find, yes, the woman should always be wanting your attention. She should be pining for you. You know, just like, you know, shout out Psych Hacks. You need to be the adored. She needs to be the adorer. You know, but a man should never be wanting more time with a woman than a woman wants with him. It goes back to that hypergamous. Women want a man that's better than them. Women don't ever want, you know, a man to be in a submissive role. They want that, you know, the best, you know, women that have the most attraction, the women that are most attracted to men, or I guess what I'm trying to say is, when women have high interest for a man. You know, they just beg for the tell you love his presence. You know, you won't have to do anything other than, you know, you'll probably have to, you know, limit time. You know, like, hey, I can't do it. I can't. She'll want you to go everywhere with her, right? But anyway, we'll see you on the next one.